Welcome to Living Big. Hey, I'm Marley.
And I'm Kylie. We're thrilled you're here. This season, we're exploring how to discover, cultivate, and balance passions with everyday life.
Through inspiring stories and actionable tips, we'll dive into turning dreams into reality, embracing creativity, and finding joy in what truly lights you up.
We're talking with creatives, entrepreneurs, hobbyists, and people who've turned passions into careers.
So stick around as we dive in.
Welcome back to another episode of Living Big. We have a special guest with us here today. This is Ashlyn, up in the right-hand corner here, or left-hand corner, depending on if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to it, she's amazing. We're so excited for you to get to know her. And we got to know her because our husbands all worked together. And she is absolutely phenomenal. She joined book club. So we became fast friends, and we are so impressed because she has self-published a book in 2024. And so we knew with this season of the podcast being all about pursuing passions that we absolutely had to have Ashlyn on. And we wanted to talk about the book that she wrote, that she's been thinking about for a long time, and accomplishing this lifelong dream. In fact, on your Instagram, you said, "I finally accomplished a lifelong dream by writing and self-publishing a book. It's about fighting perfectionism, and the link is in my bio if you're interested." And your book, Every Little Dandelion, which was published December 2nd, I believe.
I don't even know the answer to that question about my own
on
book.
Amazon? On Amazon it says?
Yes, it's on Amazon.
But I think it's an inspiring example of following a dream and following like your passions. And I'm just genuinely so impressed that you sought out to do that and then accomplished it. I think it takes so much courage to do that. And so we're really excited to dive into how that came about and all of the work that went into it and where you're at right now. So I'm very, very excited to talk about that with you.
Well, thank you, Kylie. Those are very kind words. I'm excited too.
I was just going to point out also, and we'll get into all this a little bit later, but like, oh my goodness, Ashlyn, you are a rock star doing all of this, finishing your book, moving, two littles, all of it. Oh my goodness, just so much has been going on in your life that I'm sure has made publishing this book an absolute adventure. So we're super excited to get into it. Oh, it's going to be so fun.
Wow. How long did it take you from like first conception to writing it to publishing? Like how long was that entire journey?
Well, I mean, like if you're talking like seeds of the idea, then it's like probably 10 years, you know. But if you're talking about like I sat down and I was like, okay, I'm going to actually finish this book, started scheduling times on my calendar to write and interviewing women for their stories to put in the book. I started that in early 2023. So it took me 2 years.
So awesome.
I know we had talked about it quite a while ago, probably around that time, maybe even earlier. I don't remember exactly, that you had this plan to write a book and you kind of knew what you wanted it to be about. And so it's so fun to see now it has come to fruition, and I'm sure it is wonderful and I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, you guys inspired me. Everyone was so encouraging at the book club to do it so that they could read it. So
no, I'm really excited. We're planning on, it's going to be our February book. So I've already ordered my copy. It's not here yet, but I'm anticipating its arrival, and we're going to read it and discuss all the things. And I just think like the premise of it is so beautiful. So would you just kind of walk us through like, what is the book? How did you decide to write it? And some more of these stories that you kind of hinted at.
yeah, absolutely. So the book is based off of an analogy that I heard from a mission therapist who did a little like group fireside when I was on my mission. And the analogy just hit me really hard. And so it's the idea that, you know, think about a kid in your life who you just adore, who you love, and imagine them coming running up to you and they're so excited to show you something. And they're like, look, I picked you a bouquet of flowers. And they hand you this bouquet of flowers and it is dandelions. It's not flowers, it's weeds. And your reaction to that is likely still thrilled gratitude. Right? Like, you know, this kid who you just adore hands you these dandelions and you're like, oh, Thank you so much. I love them. And you're not even faking it. Like
Yeah.
you really do love it because it's from them. And it's the idea that God is that same way with us. And
Mhm.
so when we bring him our offerings, even if they are legitimately dandelions, not a bouquet of roses, he accepts those offerings with thrilled gratitude. And he is overjoyed to receive our offerings. And so the book, it takes us through. I've interviewed several women who were willing to share their stories with me. I'm so grateful for, and then some stories of my own. And each section, the first section is about just give the dang dandelion. So when you think that your offering is too imperfect, that it's not good enough yet, just give the dang dandelion because God will be thrilled that you gave it. So it's stories about doing that. And then each story is paired with a little essay that I wrote that, kind of hopefully gives some sort of like inspiring tidbit to encourage you to do that. The second section is about accepting dandelions. So everybody in your life is also just giving their best, giving dandelions and imperfect offerings. And so it's stories about accepting that and how to do that. And then the third section is about recognizing dandelions and the beauty in them, even while you're waiting for promised blessings of the Lord that haven't come yet. And so it's about being able to appreciate the value of the dandelion without giving up hope for something better to come eventually. Those are kind of the three sections of the book, what it's all about.
It's so amazing. Like, seriously, such a beautiful thought. I want to know, like, why is that so significant or personally meaningful to you? Like, why did you choose that topic? Because I think it's beautiful. I think it's amazing. I think it's something I need in my life because I struggle with perfectionism. But for you, like personally, why was it so important for you to go collect these stories from women and put this into like a published piece of art,
Yeah, I think that I have always loved writing. And on my mission, I would write emails that were kind of like blog posts or like mini talks every week and send them home. And when I wrote about this one, and with my, motto being just give the dang dandelion, my family and all my friends who got the email kept bringing it up to me over and over again and talking about the difference that it made in their lives, or like just an experience where they told themselves to just give the dang dandelion. And the fact that it kept getting brought up made me feel like, yeah, okay, I have a lot of ideas. I have a whole like running note on my phone of all these ideas to write about, but this is the one that I've heard people mention over and over again had an impact on them.
It was really resonating.
Yes. And so I knew it wasn't just for me. This wasn't a mindset shift that only helped me. It was a mindset shift that was going to help other people too. And so when I was trying to decide what to write the book on, I felt pretty certain that this was the idea I wanted to at least have be the umbrella that I fit all my other ideas under, because I already knew that it had been impactful for other people and hopefully could be again.
That's so cool. I love it. I think it's going to bless so many lives. And I think it's really cool that you mentioned when you have a thought that other people keep bringing back up, or even if it's just in your own head that keeps repeating itself, like that's something you need to pay attention to, whether that's because you need to write a book or something completely different. Like there's a reason for some of those thoughts really like permeating and repeating over and over, whether that's like we need to learn a lesson from them, or we need to share that with other people, or other people like really need that experience themselves. I think that's really awesome that you listened to that and were able to recognize, oh, like this is impactful for not just me, and maybe there's even more I could dive into. I could get deeper with this and help other people. So I absolutely love that. I also love just the premise. Marley and I both served our missions in Ukraine, which you already know. But we had a man named Jorg Klebengat, Elder Klebengat, for our mission, and he's from Germany. And he is an amazing man, convert, all these incredible things. But he would share kind of something similar to the premise of your book with the dandelions. But he would say, little kids, they draw you a picture, right? and you put it up on the fridge and you're so proud of them, like, and they tell you what it is, and sometimes you might even have to ask what it is because you actually can't decipher what the drawing is. They're like, this is me and you, and we're at the grocery store, or we're playing outside at the park, and you're like, okay, it's like a bunch of scribbles. But you put it up on the fridge and you show everyone that comes into the house. You're like, so proud. Look at this thing that my child created. And he used that same analogy that you used of, that's all God is asking for us, is our imperfect little scribbles, and they're so beautiful that he's putting it up on his heavenly fridge, and he's like showing everyone who comes in, look what my daughter, look what my son did, like, it's so amazing. When in actuality, like, they're not really the most amazing artist in the world, but they gave everything in that drawing. And so I think that this message is something the whole world needs to hear. Like, as long as we are trying to do good and we're making efforts, that we need to accept those as being good enough, instead of always being like, I'm just not there yet, you know, I wish I could get there. So
Absolutely. And it's not something that you can just tell yourself to do, right? You can't just be like, okay, go ahead and accept your efforts and believe that they're good enough if you're not feeling that way. You can't just force yourself to. And so, you know, that's why it was exciting for me to kind of write the book and go through all of these different ways that you can slowly change that mindset in your life so that it's easier for you to accept your own efforts and your own offerings too, you know?
yeah, I think that's amazing. How did you find the women you talked to?
All over the place. Some of them were women who I, went to Jerusalem with, who I knew had stories that I wanted to include. Some of them were just women who I admired and approached on social media or in a ward or neighborhood and said, hey, can I share your story? Or do you have any stories I could share? Because I really think you're awesome. And anybody who didn't get approached for a story, it's not because I don't think they're awesome. I kind of just was like, hey, I'm writing a book. And anybody who came to me, I, took their stories and used them. But every woman has a story that could have gone in this book. And so, I could have just kept going and writing for years and years, because every single woman I know has an experience that could have fit perfectly within one of these three themes, and in such an inspirational for everyone else. So it was really fun to be able to see that and see those stories coming to life.
Yeah, that's so impactful. I love that you took life examples from other people too.
Yeah, that was so fun. I'm sitting here, and I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but you have gone through a lot of things, and within a short period of time, it feels like. What was it that pushed you to keep going and get this out within a certain amount of time? Like, what gave you that deadline and kind of helped you to make it happen?
Well, there were a couple times that I definitely almost stopped. I feel like one of the things that was really hard was that I feel like there are two kind of major stopping points with a little restart. And one of them is that when I first started writing the book, I had my first baby, about a year earlier. And pregnancy and postpartum just hit me so much harder than I thought. And not even in these extreme ways that I felt like made sense. Like, I have so many friends who really struggled with major nausea or other issues that were really intense and needed medical intervention. And for me, it was just intense, extreme exhaustion. And so both through pregnancy and through postpartum, I felt like I had no creativity because I just was too tired. I was too tired to even have the brain power to be creative and to write the way that I've always loved writing. And so when my son was about a year old, I had really encouraged my husband to fulfill one of his lifelong dreams of running the Boston Marathon. And so I was in Boston with him while he was running it. And I was so excited for him. And it was so fun to be his cheerleader. And the energy and the excitement of it made me realize, like, I want to do this. And I actually have the energy to again. Like,
oh, good.
My kid is a year old, and I finally feel like I have the energy to accomplish a dream of my own. And he was amazing and flipped roles and became my cheerleader as I started working on this. And just a couple months after I really started, working on the book seriously, we found out I was pregnant, and it was a surprise. And we were thrilled. We were so excited, but I was also like, I'm not going to finish this book. I am going to be too exhausted. It's not going to happen. And my husband was very supportive of whatever I chose to decide, but he was also like, you can do this. Like, you might be really tired, but I do know that you can do it. And I was writing my, intro to the book, and realized just how hypocritical it would be if I didn't just give the dang dandelion anyways, at this point, in particular for me, in that season of my life. What I needed was to just keep going. And even if that meant like that I'd end up scrapping it all and throwing it in the garbage because it wasn't good enough, I just needed to start. So that was kind of the first time that I was about to give up and, kept going. And then again, when I was getting closer to the end, you guys already know this, but I guess nobody else listening does, but our husband's work went kind of crazy. And
full-blown crazy. We can just say that.
It was a wild and stressful time of life. And for a while, he was working 2 jobs, and for a while, he was working almost 3. And then he was, full-time interviewing and trying to find a new job. And then when he did, it was an offer that we accepted to go cross country, which we had never anticipated, and was absolutely, we were blindsided by that decision. And so I was completely overwhelmed and still struggling with the postpartum exhaustion of my second child. And I was so many times, I was so close to being like, I'm just going to put this on the back burner and do it again later. And all of a sudden, it would just kind of hit me like a brick, like when it's not really you and your thoughts, it was like, if you don't finish this now, you might never finish it. So just do it, even if it's not going to be perfect because of this, all of these things going on in your life. Just do it, because I want you to just feel like you finished something. And so for me in this season of my life, what I needed most was to accomplish a dream and to finish something. And that might not be the case for everybody, right? But that was what I needed. And so that's what kept me going, was the idea of finishing something, even if it wasn't necessarily a perfect work.
Oh.
What a cool thing that the book theme itself was like what you needed to learn. You know what I mean? Like, you needed to have that experience of this book that you were writing about to get it out there. Like, everything was stacked against you, seemingly, right? Under normal circumstances, you'd just be like you said, like, it's okay to just do it later. But I think it's really amazing that you felt the nudge to just persist against that. And you had a husband who was supportive and knows you well enough to know when to push and when to take his pedal off the gas, and I think that's so incredible and so inspiring.
I just also have to say that knowing all of this about kind of the background of the story and how the book came to be, you just completely exemplify everything that we are trying to focus on with our podcast here. You are incredibly kind and building your own community, but then also pursuing your passions. And you and Britton are very just high achieving, incredible examples to all of us of the things that you can accomplish by kind of pushing yourself a little bit to do those things. I'm so sure that there are people listening to this episode and like, I've been thinking I needed to do this thing. This is your sign. This is the sign. Just do it. Just give the dang dandelion. and I hope that people are already inspired. I know I am. I mean, we have lots to continue talking about, but I feel so inspired already by the things that you shared. And I hope that all of our listeners do as well.
Absolutely. And I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. But I just also want, like, you guys are really talking me up. But as you know, from the many times that I showed up to book club in absolute chaos, like, I am a hot mess, emphasis on the mess. Like,
We all are.
my life does not look perfect. And so you did not have to be somebody who looks like their life is put together in order to jump in and get started on something that you're excited about pursuing. You do not have to be an influencer on social media.
Right.
I have like 100 followers and I don't even care about getting more. Like, you don't have to fit this stereotype of people who pursue their passions in order to pursue your own.
Yeah. I think that's an important distinction. And something that I loved that you said is, I feel like there's different times and seasons, right? Like for some people, it might be right for them to just try and start something that they've always wanted to do. And it may not be in the moment about actually accomplishing the thing, like finishing it. It might just be like, I'm just going to just begin to dabble in this or whatever. But I think it's amazing that for you in that time of your life, it was more about actually finishing and accomplishing and showing yourself that you could do the really, really difficult thing amidst all of the crazy stuff that you were going through than it was about just the passion itself, you know? And so there are different times and there are different seasons. And so I think that's an important distinction you made as well, something that really stuck out to me when you were saying that was super important for me, this specific project. Maybe in the future, it'll be different, you know? So I love that lesson.
Yes.
Oh, I love that. Okay, let's kind of talk about overcoming perfectionism. I'm sure that's something at least Kai and I have talked about it. And Ashlyn, I figure since you've written a whole book about it, it's something you've struggled with. I have 100% struggled and still continue forever recovering perfectionist here. How do you push past that fear or maybe that block that's like, oh, you may not have what it takes to do this and do it anyway? What helps you get past that?
Yeah, such a good question. And I mean, that's like the whole premise of the book, right? So, if whatever we talk about right now doesn't give you what you need, like there's a whole nother
Read the book.
section you can read. But I think my first thought is just one of the things that I talk about in the book is fake it till you make it. And it's so interesting, the reaction that, this is something that me and my sister and my mom and all these people around me have talked about before lots of times. And it's so interesting, the reaction that we get when we mention that, because the societal idea of fake it till you make it is this idea of like putting on a front, putting on a mask for other people to see. And that is absolutely not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is fake it to yourself. And we're not thinking about or caring about what anybody else sees or thinks about this, but fake it till you make it for yourself until you feel the way you want to. And so whatever that is, that can work in any area of your life. In my book, I talk about, doing that in terms of prayer. If you want to feel like a really prayerful person, pretend that you are until you get there. But that applies to everything and any passion that you do. You really have to just pretend like you're already good at it and do it and keep doing it until you become the way you want to be. And so, like I said, like I just had to start writing, even though I was like, it's been years since I've really written and gotten feedback on my writing in a way that I know what I'm writing is good. And I had to just start writing, even if I was going to throw away so much of what I did because it wasn't really polished yet. I was never going to get to the point where it was polished unless I started. And I still wouldn't even say that most of the book is polished because, like I said, I just kind of got to a point where I had to finish and know that it was done. And so I think I could write a lot more polished book than this one is. But the first time I opened it, I saw a typo and I was like, oh, but
makes it more real, I feel like.
Yes. Just being willing to accept the imperfections for the sake of the fulfillment that comes is worth it.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Oh, so good. do you feel like there were any moments where maybe throughout your writing or just in general where you felt like some of your imperfections have become your strength in, like I said, in any part of this?
I think that so I've always really viewed, imperfections or weaknesses and strengths on this scale, as one and the same thing. And on one end of any trait is where it becomes a weakness, and on the other end of any trait is where it becomes a strength. And so, like, for example, I think one of those traits that I have is being passionate. And that can be both an imperfection and a weakness, and it can be a strength. And I've seen that play out so many times in my life, where if I let it become an imperfection or a weakness, I steamroll over other people's feelings, or I'm not aware that they're more emotionally invested in a conversation topic, and I'm just, passionate and excited and debating, and I hurt their feelings. And I can only turn it into a strength and use that passion as a strength if I'm being really self-aware about the way that I'm using that passion and the way that it's impacting people around me. So I think that's true for any trait that we have. And I think that all of those traits are God-given, and He wants us to be spending our life learning how to use them as a strength instead of letting them become a weakness. But I think that is one of the, traits that I have that definitely encouraged my writing in the first place. I'm very, passionate about the ideas and opinions and stories I hear and sharing those.
So
I
good.
love that. That fits right in with this whole season and is so good. I love all of that.
Just genuinely loving the entire conversation. I feel like everyone has to go read the book. I'm so excited to read the book. And I genuinely have always felt very inspired by you. So I really appreciate you being willing and vulnerable to come on and share a little bit more about your story and to write a book and publish that work. Like, I know that's a very vulnerable experience in and of itself. And so, like, letting people into your inner thoughts, and even if that's something that you're passionate about and you openly share, this is a different level. Like, it is very vulnerable. So I really, really appreciate it. Mara, is there anything else you wanted to talk to her about with the perfectionism before we jump into some of the other stuff?
Kind of my last question here is, do you have any advice for people struggling with that self-doubt, or they think that they are filled with too many weaknesses, and to maybe get past that? How does faith play into that as they get past that?
I kind of had two thoughts as you asked that question. And bear with me because they weren't things I thought about before, so I might not come out very clearly. But the first thing is that I've noticed, and my perfectionism has usually come most strongly. I've struggled most with it at times in my life where I feel like I'm not living up to my past self. And so, like, I'll see myself being really successful in a phase. And then, like, for example, I'll come home from my mission and hit a phase where it's really hard for me to even get motivated to get up in the morning or read my scriptures or do the things that felt really, really simple and easy before. Because I'm not feeling like I'm living up to my past self and how successful I was then. And then again, that very easily happens when you have a baby, because you have this whole other life to take care of, and that makes it harder to take care of your own. And so these phases in life when that's happened, I've noticed that the only thing that can really pull me out of that self-centeredness of, focusing on myself and how I'm not good enough or not as good as I was in the past, is when I just do something. And I guess one thing that I share in the book that's kind of along this line is, so I served my mission in Russia, close to you guys in Ukraine. And, we had, I'm sure you did too, to learn the Russian language. We had this big honking dictionary. It's like this big. And it's like a two-sided dictionary. And the first half was where you could look up a word in English and then read the Russian definition. And the second half is where you could look up a word in Russian and read the English definition. And I learned pretty early on with some mishaps in my translation to make sure that I looked at both sides. So I really knew the connotation of the word that I was using. And so one time I was translating the word success for a lesson, and I found the Russian word uspekha. And so I flipped, to the Russian side to make sure that it was actually the word I wanted to use. And the definitions that were listed under the English translations of the word uspekha were progress, advancement, headway. And that hit me so hard. Like, progress is success. And I love that idea. And that is something that is so important to remember when you're struggling with self-doubt, when you're comparing yourself to other people or to your past selves or to some unexisting person. I think you have to remember that progress is success. And the only thing that will ever get you out of a funk when you're feeling that intense perfectionism is doing some little small action to get yourself moving so that you're no longer focused on yourself, but you're focused on the action or the people around you or something other than your own self.
Oh, I love that. Kind of to shake it up to get you out of the funk. I feel that. I know what you are talking about when you're like not meeting maybe the expectations of your old self. I used to talk a lot about how Sister Arnell was so cool because that's who I was when I was a missionary, right? I was like, man, I really miss Sister Arnell. And yeah, I totally understand that. And having to overcome maybe those feelings of inadequacy based on a higher living at some earlier point in your life. Oh, that's some tough stuff. But I like the idea of being able to kind of shake yourself out of that funk by doing something different. I'm sure there's endless ideas and things you could do to shake it up. Go for it, Tay.
I've also always thought of success as being like the end destination. So that's a really interesting distinction there, that success is advancement. It's just like one step farther. It's not the actual end of something, but it's the process along the way, the progress along the way, and just trying to do small things one step at a time to get a little bit better. And I think not holding yourself back based on who you used to be is just always an important thing for us to remember, because like you said, the mom one, more than anything, I'm like, oh, I can relate to that so much. Like, man, I every time I have a kid during my postpartum period, I ask myself, I used to be able to do this. Like,
right.
Why all of a sudden is this hard? It's not hard. It's not, I should be able to. And then I get so mad at myself because I'm like, I'm holding myself to this level of like, you can, and you should, it shouldn't be difficult. And it gets better. It does. And I'm usually able to pick that back up at some point, but not holding myself to that stage. We had someone on the podcast last season who talked about postpartum overwhelm, and she was like, you need to tell yourself, I'm doing 2 months postpartum right now, not I'm doing no babies with the baby. Like, you can't, it's not possible. So don't be holding yourself to standards that just aren't realistic or real at the time too. So I love that example so much.
I remember that episode. So true. Very true.
It was life-changing for me. I was like 2 months postpartum and I was like, man, I need this, and I think we all do, whether that's after a baby or anything else that you're going through in your life, is just not holding yourself back based on these unforeseen like expectations or even what you used to be able to accomplish that's suddenly difficult for whatever reason. I think that's a really important thing to remember. I'm curious about the practical path to writing and publishing a book, because you've now become an expert in this. You've done this, you've learned it. Like, that's amazing. So what surprised you the most about the process of writing and publishing a book?
Well, I don't know that you should call me an expert. Like I said, my book still has a typo, so.
That's okay. You've done the thing, right?
Yes, but I think the thing that surprised me most was how hard editing is and how long it takes. Oh man, and I didn't even hire editors, which I clearly should have. But I, my mom and my husband, and then I have two cousins who all went through my book and helped me do a little bit of editing, which was incredibly generous and kind of them. But I still, even with all of their help, spent probably 100 hours just editing. And I still didn't end up with the product that I would have wanted to, so editing takes a long time. And I think if I did this again, I'd probably hire an editor.
I feel like I would be antsy at that point too, because I'd be like, I wrote it and I want to get it out there. And now we're just like picking through it with a fine tooth comb. Like, let's just get this on the road. So I
just send it.
Yeah. You're amazing for having everyone go through it so many times. And that makes sense. If you go back, you could do that differently. Are you planning on writing more books in the future?
I certainly don't have any plans in the works.
Like right now, I need a break.
I've always written blog posts since I was in college, so I'll definitely keep writing blog posts. And then if inspiration hits, I'll write a book. I think that so the Doctrine and Covenants has the headings at the beginning of each of them, and one of the headings that I've always really loved talks about how I think it's Martin Harris had an inspired desire to be one of the witnesses. And I've always loved that phrase, inspired desire. And I really do feel like God inspires our desires at certain times for certain things. And so I really did feel like, he inspired my desire to do this book right now. And maybe he will another one in the future, but I don't have any plans in place.
I hope so. I also love your blog posts so much. One of them in specific was life-changing for me, and I read through the whole thing with Hiram, and I sent it to every single member of my family. So I'm like, I love your writing and it impacts me. So even if it's just me, which I know it's not, I just want you to know that, because I feel like, again, putting yourself out there and being brave, maybe you don't always hear the feedback, but I really, really appreciate you sharing your talent and your passions. It's been really beautiful for me. So thank you.
That's really meaningful to hear. Thank you.
Okay. How can our listeners take the first step towards their own creative goals? What do you think? Any advice on that?
I mean, like I said earlier, just start. But I think the big thing is baby steps. If you have a dream and the end goal is publish a book, that is not actually the goal that you start with. That's just overwhelming.
Yeah.
You can't publish a book when there's nothing to publish yet. And so, the first goal was write the intro. The first goal was write an outline even, so that I knew what I wanted. And so really breaking it down into the very most baby steps you possibly can makes it feel manageable to start. So that'd be the first step I would say is break it down to the very smallest baby step you can think of and accomplish that. And then accomplishing that will give you the momentum to keep going.
Such good advice.
I love that. It's been out for a month now. How has your book been received by readers? Do you have people who have read it? I'm assuming you do.
Yes. Like I said, the goal for this book was simply to publish a book. I didn't have any numerical goals for copies sold. And that's part of the reason why I chose self-publishing instead of going with a formal publisher. There's the uncertainty of not knowing if a publisher even wants your book. And I think that would normally be people's stumbling block, but that wasn't even really it for me. It was more that I just knew, like I said, in this season, what I felt like I needed was to accomplish the goal and the dream, which was to publish the book. And so self-publishing was, kind of the most direct way to get that done and still have full control over, the timeline and it actually getting finished. And so I think that that is why I went the route that I did with self-publishing. And it's also the reason that I didn't really do any marketing. I didn't build my social media following. I haven't really done anything to advertise for the book. So numerically, it's 50 copies or something. It's nothing special.
Awesome.
But it's really fun to hear even just one person's feedback. Because that really has been my focus. a lot in life is just doing things one by one for the one, the way that the Savior does. And so, you know, even just a friend from high school messaging me and saying that she read it and that it really meant a lot to her and, you know, has helped her already is so meaningful and makes it all feel worth it and exciting.
I think that's so amazing.
I love it. The dandelion was worth it. Oh, so sweet. I love that. How do you feel like going after this has changed you, maybe as a person or a mom or a friend? Has it?
Yeah. Oh, it for sure has. Well, I think one thing is that it's really opened my eyes to be looking for people's stories and how the interpretation of those stories can then help me or other people in their life. I really enjoyed finding people to interview and interviewing them. And it was so inspiring to me to learn how they've overcome difficult moments in their lives. And then, like I said, I really needed to just accomplish something and see it done. In my day-to-day life, I don't see a lot of things get done. And the things that do get undone over and over again, you know.
So real.
Done every time I do them. And so I think that one thing that it's really helped me with, or started helping me with, it's only been a month, right? But is just seeing that I could really accomplish something kind of gave me that confidence to feel like I can always get to the finish line, even in the things that are really small, like getting the dishes done at night.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Just making it like real for even the small stuff in your life. It doesn't have to be, oh, you can accomplish hiking Mount Everest, but it's like, no, I can accomplish maybe like not yelling at my kid today, and that's amazing, or whatever it is. Like just starting with the small real life stuff, I think is awesome.
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
And on that note, even not just not yelling at them, but maybe you do yell, and what you accomplish is having a really beautiful apology moment where they learn that it's okay to not be perfect, that it's okay to mess up and yell, and how do you fix it when you do, you know?
How do you repair? I love that.
I love that.
Ashlyn, you're so beautiful. I love you.
I know. I love
You guys
it.
are
It
the
just
ultimate cheerleaders.
Oh, it's so much fun to have these conversations too, because like we've talked, like you said, so many times at book club, and we've had really meaningful conversations. But one reason why Marley and I started the podcast, and this is a little bit of a side tangent, but it's because it's fun to dive into someone's like deeper story and have a very targeted conversation where like we may have just chatted about your book, but it's so much fun to like uncover the layers and like really dive into the meat of it and hear stuff that maybe we normally wouldn't, because it is so inspiring and it is impactful for each and every one of us. So I really appreciate you coming on. It's awesome.
Thanks.
I was gonna say, it reminds me of something I read about Brene Brown, how she's a qualitative researcher, qualitative, I can't remember. But she basically does that. She takes people's stories and does research and makes assumptions and things off of people's stories. But she talks about how when we receive people's stories, you know, we kind of have this obligation to hold it and to be kind to it and whatnot. And I feel like that's definitely what, Ashlyn, you're doing with people's stories, and you've been able to create a book out of it and show people how they are presenting their dandelions, and I think that that's so incredible. So beautiful.
I love it. So as of right now, you're not planning on writing another book, but do you have a passion that you are pursuing, even if it's smaller than publishing your own book?
Well, pursuing passions takes a lot of time, and we also really highly value family time. So we have kind of had a little off and on system. You know, I was able to help put in the sacrifice and be the cheerleader for Britain to accomplish the Boston Marathon. And then he did the same and put in countless hours of taking care of our kids in the evenings so that I could write. It takes a lot of time to write a book. So
Yeah.
so now I'm excited to help him find his next dream. And that's what I'm passionate about right now is, helping him figure out what is exciting to him and support him in doing that. And, by the time that he's done with that, probably my next idea will have come around in some way. So.
Oh, I love that. A give and take in the partnership and being passionate about, that is a passion in and of itself, being passionate about your family and like everyone's happiness and joy and fulfillment.
Absolutely.
I think that's beautiful and amazing. Well, we're going to wrap up here, but like I said, I'm just like genuinely so amazed by the fact that you achieved a lifelong goal despite all the things that were going on and that you were willing to have the courage to pursue that. I think it's just so beautiful that you went about that and embraced that imperfection, and you're going to help so many people who do come upon your book and read it to hopefully be able to feel like they can also do that they can embrace imperfection. And I believe that passion really doesn't require perfection, right? Like it's just about doing something that lights you up and makes you happy. And so if we're always chasing perfection, we may never get to experience the spark of joy that passion can bring our life. And so I'm hoping for all of the people listening that you will just have the willingness to try and to just give it a go, give it your all, but just try it and see what can happen from there. Do you have any final advice or encouragement for our listeners today?
I think a visual that helps always is thinking of our life like a spiral staircase, because it's so easy to hit up against a struggle or a trial or a period of depression or anxiety and feel like, what? I thought I got past this already. I've done this a million times before. Why? And you feel like you fell to the bottom of the staircase that you were climbing. And so if you remember to think about your life as a spiral staircase, then every time that you have that feeling where you come around a corner and you're like, deja vu, I've been here before, instead of getting discouraged about it, recognize that means you've leveled up. That means you're on the next level of the spiral staircase. You came all the way around, and you're going to learn how to deal with those issues in a deeper way again and again and again throughout your life. And hitting up against something that you've struggled with in the past doesn't mean that you fell to the bottom. It just means that you're the next level up, and you're going to learn how to do so even better this time.
I love that. I think that's an amazing visual. So beautiful. Well, Ashlyn, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for inspiring others. And everyone, you can check out her book, Every Little Dandelion, on Amazon. So please read it. And I hope that this can give you the courage to explore your own creative passions. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Ashlyn.
Thank you, guys. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks for joining us this week on Living Big. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you liked this episode, please leave a rating and review.
Join the crew on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for all the behind the scenes, fun, and more. We are incredibly grateful for the community we're building and can't wait to see the growth going forward.
Don't forget to check out Living Big Labs for all of your social media management needs.
Living Big Labs is here to help small businesses thrive by taking the stress of social media off their shoulders so they can focus on what they love and do best.
And remember, you have our permission to let go and live without missing opportunities to connect with other humans. Pursue your passions, no matter how ever changing.
Have fun and live big.